Greetings, folks. Sealer here. Today, Wargaming announced on its development blog a couple of in-testing AA changes that they are working on. I do want to stress that these are in testing. They are subject to change, and given, I think, the potential impact these changes have, it wouldn't surprise me if Wargaming ends up adjusting them to some extent. So the first change that they've made or they're planning is that a ship's detectability range today, even before this change is implemented, a ship's detectability by air is equal to its maximum firing range of its AA guns. But what is changing is that a ship will remain detected for 20 seconds after the AA guns cease firing. So if the AA guns go off, and the planes even leave the area of the ship's detectability by air, the ship will remain detected for 20 seconds. And I think for destroyers, this is a big deal, especially for those that historically have had pretty good AA or very good AA, like the European destroyers, the US Navy destroyers, some of the other destroyers in other nations, like the alternative branch on the Soviets or the Japanese. It basically, in my opinion, this change should frankly discourage destroyers from ever turning their AA on. Under unless it's under very unusual circumstances, like they're completely isolated and no other opponents can fire on them, then maybe only then do they turn it on, because they're now very vulnerable unless they can drop into smoke. So I'm assuming here that a ship that gets into smoke or is in smoke will not be detected, even if their AA goes off. But I think this potentially could be a big deal and basically discourage destroyers from using their AA, like I said, under unless it's under very extreme circumstances, which is kind of ironic from a historical perspective, because destroyers, especially in the U.S. Navy during World War II, were very important in supplying AA support for their fleets, and I think that became true with other nations' destroyers later on in the war as well. So it seems kind of unusual that Wargaming would move to this model and basically make a significant be a significant deterrent to using AA, especially like on destroyers. I also think that this could be an issue for cruisers, because as a cruiser main, at the start of a match, often a carrier will fly his planes around to get visibility on the opposing fleet, and as a cruiser, I normally leave my AA on. And if my ship is going to remain detected for 20 seconds, even after the planes leave the area, then I have to do even more aggressive maneuvering or avoiding those early salvos from long range, battleships. And so it might be discouraging to even turn on AA for cruisers, at least early in the game or under certain circumstances. So I'm not sure that this proposed change is necessarily a good thing. And I would be curious to see what or people's opinions are of this. And I'd kind of like to hear more from Wargaming what their motivation was around this. So that's the first point that they've made. The second point that they're planning to change, and I think this one is probably going to be a little more cut and dry and clear, that is going to be useful for most ships, the interest of most ships, but and not in the interest of others. And that is that the detectability range by air of all destroyers is being cut in half. And obviously, if you're a destroyer player, this is very welcome news. This means that, destroyers already today often have air detectability of less than 3 kilometers. This means they'll be less than two, one, or even 1.5. This means that planes have to get very close before they're able to detect destroyers, unless the destroyer's AA is going off, that is. And so I know for carrier players in particular, this is going to be well, they're going to perceive this as bad, basically, because it means that by the time you detect a destroyer, you will not have chance, or essentially have almost no chance, to set up any sort of attack run. So again, destroyer players will be like, "Woo!" Now carriers are, first of all, it's going to be a lot harder for them to spot me, and secondly, even when they do spot me, they won't have time, or they'll have a very difficult time lining up their attacks. And so I think destroyer players in general, like I said, will be pretty pleased with this, and carrier players or regular carrier players will be very frustrated by this. So this again will be an incentive, at least for destroyers, to probably almost never turn your AA on. Because it basically maximizes your chances of not being detected by planes. So I'm of a mixed opinion um, how good of a change these potentially are. I understand that wargaming is trying to modify the parameters and try to make destroyers more resilient to AA or to aerial attacks by making them stealthier. I can kind of understand that they want to make ships, retain their visibility or retain detection after the planes leave the area. Maybe that's intended to be the counter to making the destroyers more stealthy. I just don't know. So I'm not entirely convinced that these changes are necessarily all for the up and up, although I think the intention is to try to make things more balanced from, certainly based on the large volume of outcry from players who really dislike carriers. So please do leave your comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are. If anybody has any contact information with Wargaming to see what their thoughts are, I'm sure there's going to be lots of commentary from community contributors and other sources around this and get their opinions about what's going on here. I would love to hear from the community. And if there's further updates, I'll post another video. So take a look at this. And again, I strongly encourage everybody to take a look at the development blog. I'm going to do one other video from another announcement, which is more on the positive news about upcoming content for the Germans and a bunch of cosmetic and other usability changes that are coming, and I'll post a separate video for that. But for this video, I'd be curious to see what your thoughts were. So hope you enjoyed the commentary and thought the input here was useful. Please do leave your comments below, and as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.